Thank you. It's great to get a great round of applause at the beginning of a presentation, but I realize when I talk to these audiences that I'm standing between you and lunch. So I have to come up with something important to say, and the most important thing I think I can give is inspiration to this audience, because I looked at the demographics, because who attends this, and how many of you either consider yourself an entrepreneur or would like to be one? That's fantastic. Okay, so my job today, the only thing I want to do today is inspire you. But then there's this slide. I put this slide in all my presentations these days because I believe, and I give a lot of talks now, but I believe there is sort of an inherent lie in the things that I say and that other speakers say, and it comes down to selection bias. The reason you get handed these microphones typically is because you have been associated with something that's successful. Now, we like to think as individuals that the success is solely due to our brilliance or our tenacity or just something besides luck. But I will say that I've been working for many years and I've failed a lot of times, but I've gotten lucky so many times. And over the years, I've tended to convince myself that a lot of things that I think are my decisions are actually just fate happening. So I'm going to tell you what I believe, and I will share with you honestly everything that's shaped what I've done. But I want you to understand also that I don't really know if I was just getting lucky and if it's the truth or if it's just the way it looks from where I sit. So with that as a precursor, let me tell you the rules of how I make presentations these days. I used to tell people to turn their cell phones off. Come on. Keep them on. Take a call. I don't care. Questions? Absolutely. I think presentations are better if the questions are real time. These days, I don't even prepare these things much more than a week in advance. So I believe in taking questions during the presentation. So if somebody has a question, it's burning in your mind, you want to get up here and grab one of these microphones, I will change this presentation and answer the questions. I believe it to being an interrupt-driven presentation if possible. But with that as a background, I'd like to talk about some of the biases that I bring to this presentation. I really kind of started working when I was 17. I was a freshman in college, and I had taken enrolled in Washington University over in St. Louis, and I'd taken a class in computer science. Now, this was not my major. I was supposed to be an economics student, so I was in arts and sciences, but I took this engineering class. And I loved the class, but the textbook sucked. And because I was a freshman and didn't know any better, I said to my roommate, I was like, you know, this textbook's garbage. I could write a better textbook than this. And so my roommate was like, so why don't you? I was like, all right, so I will. So I spent the summer of my freshman year of college learning first the subject matter, and then writing this textbook on Pascal. And it turns out the textbook turned into quite a success. I got signed for another book, and by the time I was a sophomore, I was a published author. Now this had this strange effect because I was now treated like one of the top engineering students, even though I was in arts and sciences. And because I'd written a computer book, I was considered, you know, one of the better computer scientists, but it was not true. I'm a mediocre software engineer. I've never been better than mediocre. But because I had these books written and all this reputation, part of the lie, right? I got put in with the best students. And that was the big thing I learned in college. It was not how to be, you know, great with software or do, you know, more efficient code. It was simply the fact that I was thrown constantly into these groups where I was the weak link, but if I could just shut up and work with the others, the results turned out great. So that was the real skill that I took out of college, and after I graduated from college, I was doing a couple things. I was blowing glass as sort of a hobby. I was working for IBM. This was back when IBM was the company, and doing some work as what they called a visiting scientist, which was an amorphous title that IBM gives people that they don't really know what they're doing, but they'll pay them anyway. And then I started another company that did that built storage cabinets, CD storage cabinets. And during this time, so I was sort of doing these three things. I was mediocre at all of them. And very suddenly, my mother died. And that really messed me up, because when Mom died, she never got to see me do anything really well. And I thought, you know, I'm sort of a mediocre engineer at IBM. I was a mediocre artist. And I had this other company that I was running that was doing pretty well. I mean, we were selling stuff overseas, but it was, you know, not so good. And I really, you know, had this life-changing experience, and I thought, well, what should I be doing? I don't want to just be mediocre. And like, what's the secret to success? And I figured, focus, concentrate, do something and do it well. So I quit IBM. I closed my company, and I started. I stopped blowing glass for a while, and I started a company called Mira. Mira was started in 1989. It still exists to this day. It still makes a lot of really good products, employs a lot of families. And I struggled with that company for 5 years before I got my first paycheck. And this was because I was totally ignorant. I was totally on my own. I did not know what I was doing. Through basically just tenacity and some luck, Mira eventually started making money and grew to the point where about 10 years after founding it, I was no longer good at running it. It had sort of outgrown my abilities to run. And so I went off and started a glass blowing school. Now, I'd been blowing glass off and on for years, and I love making glass. How many of you guys have seen hot glass before? Okay, it's getting out there a little bit. So the process of making glass was really interesting to me. And for years, when Mira wasn't making money, for those 5 years, when Mira wasn't giving me a paycheck, the way I fed myself was by making glass and making art. And I define an artist as somebody who sells something that nobody else needs. So then I opened a construction company that did pretty well. I pivoted Mira into a printing company that did pretty well. And then a couple of years later, this was about 3 years ago now, I started Square with a friend of mine, Jack Dorsey. Jack actually used to work at Mira. So that's how Jack and I met each other. And we were talking one day about, you know, starting a company, and we didn't have any idea. I'll talk about this later in the speech, but we didn't know what we wanted to do. We just wanted to work together again. So that's how Square came to be. And I give you all this background, but this is sort of strange to me to look at this, because I look at the history here. Does anything jump out at you here? Does something look strange? No, this is Keynote. I'm on Mac now. It's great. Bring it. This is fantastic. How many people do you know that actually make a living as an artist? Not a waitress, not a waiter, not somebody who's doing something and loves to make art, but actually feeds themselves making art. Selling stuff that nobody needs. I'm not talking graphic art. I'm not, you know, people need, okay, there's, 1%, 2%. It was amazing to me that I could make a living as a glass artist. This has always sort of bothered me, because none of my other artist friends could feed themselves. The guys who were doing painting couldn't do it. The guys who were doing sculpture couldn't do it. The guys who were doing ceramics really couldn't do it. I mean, I was able to feed myself on what I was making in the glass studio, and I was like, why is this happening? So I actually started looking into glass, and a lot of the speech today is going to be talking about things that I learned in probably the lowest technology field I could think of, because glass blowing has fundamentally not changed in 2,000 years. The reason it's called glass blowing is because the big invention, the disruptive technology, if you will, was the blowpipe. Humankind was shaping hot bits of glass before we could put holes in metal, but once you could put a hole in a metal pipe, you could gather glass and make a bubble, and this made everything more efficient. And this etching, it's not even a photo because they didn't have photography back then. This was 700 AD. And that glass studio is almost identical to the studio I run in St. Louis, Missouri. All of the equipment is the same, the same. I think some of the guys dress the same. Nothing's really changed. And so this really bothered me because I was thinking, well, you know, markets are efficient. They should have weeded out the neophytes, the posers, the guys like me who got into it, you know, with 2 years experience and then started making, you know, $50,000 to $100,000 a year selling glass. So how is this possible? And what I realized was that I was in the presence of a tremendous disruptive technology, but not a technology in the sense of a new way of doing stuff, but the economics of glass changed because of this man, a guy named Harvey Littleton. And Harvey, who decides to blow glass in a necktie, it's a picture from 1963. Harvey changed the world for glass art. And when I say changed the world, I mean he modernized the entire thing by doing one simple thing. He built a small furnace. Actually, it was Harvey Littleton and a glass chemist named Dominic Labino. Labino came up with this glass that melted at a slightly lower temperature, and Harvey built this pile of bricks here, and that's called the Toledo furnace. And the Toledo furnace was the reason the guys like me were able to make, and to this day are still able to make, great livings as glass blowers. Because if you think about the glass blowing studio, I'm going to go back a slide here. This furnace, this giant cauldron on the left, I guess it'll be on your right, that's the problem. Think about the physics of glass. You got to get this stuff 2,000 degrees. Well, if you need a 2,000 degree environment, it's going to take you a couple of days to heat up to that temperature. And during those days, you have to constantly feed it with fuel, right? So it could be wood, it can be coal, it can be gas, it could be electricity, it doesn't matter. You're pumping energy, i.e. money, into this thing. And this has not changed in 2,000 years. And because it is so expensive to run this process, and because once you build this furnace and get it up to 2,000 degrees, you never turn it off. Think about the economics of that. Well, that's going to be expensive to run. So to build a glass furnace, you have to build a glass company, which means you have to have something to make, right? You have to have a product. You have to have something that you're going to say, well, I'm going to make windows, or I'm going to make tumblers, or I'm going to make Christmas ornaments. You're going to pull something out of this furnace and convert it into this product, and I can sell that product, and then I get the money to keep everything running. And that takes a company. Now, even the fact that the people holding the glass, those people in the etching, they don't think of themselves as artists. Back at 700 AD, they're just factory workers. That's their factory. And that, in fact, was what I was part of when I was part of IBM. Because in the days at IBM, if you wanted to do really big stuff, you had to get permission to use this giant computer. Somebody kept those computers in remember those locked rooms with the raised floors? You had to get permission. When Harvey Littleton invented this furnace, this thing was cheap. You could build it yourself. You could melt your own glass, and you didn't have to ask anyone for permission. And because of that, there was this explosion of creativity in glass that we have never seen on this planet before. So even though the process that I practice has been around for 2,000 years, it's all new. It's all virgin territory. It's the Louisiana Purchase. You can stake your claim anywhere, and nobody has made something like that before. And that's how I was able to make a living. I was also able to learn from this man. And this is something else I love about glass. Pretty much in every profession, there is an argument as to who the best practitioner is. But in the world of glass, everyone agrees that this guy is the best in the world. His name is Lino Tagliapietra. He's in his 80s now. I studied with him, but before I even met him, I studied with him because all of the people that I studied with had studied with him. He represents the single point of knowledge. Lino knows how to do everything. As a matter of fact, all of the knowledge that is spread throughout the world came from this guy. He moved out of Italy, where they used to kill you if you taught. He came to Seattle, he taught some classes, and that seed of knowledge has spread throughout the world. So this is really interesting. When you study with somebody whose authority is absolutely unquestioned, You learn in a different manner. And I was able to study with Lino, and I was trying to make this specific shape. Now, I'd watched him make it a dozen times on video. I'd had other people teach me, but I could never quite get the shape right. And I'd made 2, 3, probably 400 attempts on this one shape. And I was like, Maestro, I pulled him over. I said, show me what I'm doing wrong. Show me what I'm doing wrong. And this is his lesson. He's like, wait, now. And my 401st try worked. And so I've applied these lessons to what I think I am living through now. And again, this may be a lie, guys. Feel free to heckle. But I think right now we are in a special time because 3 things have happened. First of all, we no longer have to ask permission to do stuff. We all have the Toledo furnace. We all have the ability to create objects that are fantastic and would be unthinkable even 10 years ago. If you create something that's great, the other thing that's happened is that communication has become free. I mean, I'm not just talking about, long distance. I'm talking about ideas move so freely and so quickly that if you have a good one, you don't have to spend a lot of money shouting it. And finally, that ideas are plentiful, and if you guys are having trouble thinking of ideas, I'm going to teach you a trick at the end of the speech that will hopefully change that. But let's talk for a minute about trust. Trust is supposed to be a good thing, right? Trust is something we value, right? I don't think so. I don't think we value trust because it's a good thing. I think we value trust because it's sort of the only thing we've got, right? Why do you trust somebody? Well, because you can't really see what they're doing, right? We trust you, we make a loan. We make a trust decision as sort of a last resort. These days, you don't have to have trust to get something built. Now, think about building a building, okay, architecture. If you want to build a building, you probably don't have the money to build it, so what do you have to do? You have to go get an architect, draw up some plans, come up with some specs, go to a banker, convince them that the building is going to conform to all these codes because they don't trust you. And the process of building a building is one that is inherently distrustful, right? Because you don't want buildings falling down and bankers don't want money being lost. And so it's a complicated process. And when we don't have when we don't have verification, when we can't prove it in advance, then we have to go through these elaborate presentations. And that's essentially what is changing right now, because if you don't want to be persuasive, or if you can't be persuasive, or if you can't be persuasive enough to get somebody else to believe your crazy idea, these days, you can just go ahead and build it. Now, the context in this room is probably largely dominated by software thinking. We think, oh, well, we can build a prototype, we can build something in software. But it extends beyond software. I've started looking for examples, and I was trying to think about, what are examples of fundamental changes in the way things are done that are not just bits and bytes? What about the big stuff? And I found some tremendous examples. The first one, biology, right? You think about life science companies, you think about pharmaceutical inventions. This is big money stuff, right? How many heard of it? This is a photo we've got a place out in California called BioCurious, which is a name I love. These guys are sequencing their own DNA. There's a couple of guys out of high school, middle school, they're coming in, doing DNA sequencing. They've taken all the expensive gear that you need to do life science research, they've put it in essentially a tech shop-like laboratory, and you come in and play with it. People are inventing in these environments. Another great example I thought of something that was big was construction itself. And this is a little plug for my hometown of St. Louis. How many of you guys have seen the City Museum? Has anyone? Okay, now, of those people who've seen the City Museum, how many have also been to Disney World and think the City Museum is cooler? Okay, I'll tell you the story about this because I was actually in the City Museum before it opened. I was building a glass studio up on one of those floors there. And this guy, just covered in dirt comes up. He's like, "Hi, I'm Bob." I was like, "Hi, I'm Jim." And I was like, "What are you doing?" I was like, "Oh, I'm building a glass studio." He's like, "Oh, cool." I didn't know he owned the building at the time. I was like, I was like, what are you doing? He's like, I'm building a whale. Now, I figured this was some like construction term that I just wasn't up with, like a whale is something like, yeah. No, I'm talking about a whale. He's built through nothing but craziness and recycled material, the most imaginative playground on the planet. I wish I could describe this place. I can't. It's just so fantastic. But the reason Bob Castley was able to build this place was that he didn't ask for anyone's permission. There is not a single building code in the world that would allow this stuff to exist. But he pulled it all together, put an open sign. St. Louis loves this. There is not an alderman, there is not a building inspector, there's no one who's going to say, well, sorry, Bob, on the airplane with that's suspended from the construction crane that's supported from recycled trees, you need a 3-foot railing. If you build it, you get away with it before they can stop you, even in the most outrageous example. And then the final example that I love as a example of a big, you can never do this on your own. Emerald Automotive. Okay, these guys, I'm thinking, what's hard to build? Cars are hard to build. You need these factories. You need all this stuff. There are 2 guys out of Lotus in England that have built this delivery van. Now this, I'm going to drive this thing next week in London. That is a van that runs entirely on electricity, has 1/5 the carbon footprint of any other form of package transportation, and they can build these things for $40,000. This is going to change the way packages get delivered. And it's fantastic. And they built it by themselves. Raised a little bit of money, built their own car, and they're going to start making these things in the Midwest. It can be done in any field. I have not yet found a counterexample. We already know space is being explored by, everyone but NASA, right? So this brings me to my second point today, and that is communication is free. And what I mean by this is sort of a good and a bad, but I think it's mostly good. Communication used to be one of the bottlenecks. You used to have a great idea, but it would just be your great idea, and you'd have to, do everything you could to get it out, but it didn't really spread. These days, on both the positive and negative, good ideas are being disseminated so quickly that if you have one, you don't have to worry about getting it out as much as you used to. Now, you still have to design the message correctly. You can't just, blurt out anything. You have to design a message correctly. But there's a method to this, and I'd be happy to discuss it when I've got more time. But if you do it correctly, the right message will cover the world. The other good thing about this is that lying is becoming more difficult. And there's something I'll share to you about. One of the things that I think has made Square so successful is that at a fundamental level, we're in a business that's full of people who lie. Like the credit card business is just really sneaky. And when Jack and I set up the company, I set up this little merchant account to do credit card processing. And when I went to close down the account, I called them up and I was like, all right, we're done. I need to close the account. They're like, you can't do that. I was like, no, really. I'm not going to use it anymore. I was like, you signed a contract. You have to work with us for 3 years. I was like, okay. Well, I'm going to close it. I was like, well, do you have to fill out this form then? So they sent me this form. This is the actual form. And they have reasons why you would want to close your account. Now, look down the list. I've magnified it over there to the right. Reason for closure. Take a look at reason number 6. Misrepresentation. What's that another word for? Lying. Now, I ask you, how bad does an industry have to be before lying becomes a checkbox on the form? How many times do you get to go, oh, well, you lied to me. Oh, got that answer again? I mean, somebody actually said, oh, we're getting this answer so much, let's just put it on the form. I don't want to have to type it in anymore. These are the guys we're competing with. Just tell them the truth. Everyone's like, well, how are you getting this tremendous growth? Well, it's pretty simple. We've got a pretty simple product, and there's no small print. That's it. That message travels. So I thought I'd give you this great slide on how to design a simple message. And I was like, no, doesn't need one. It's one word. Keep the message very simple. Okay. Final thing I promised was that I would talk about opportunity. And I think Jack and I almost made a huge mistake when we started Square, because the reason we started Square was fundamentally we wanted to work together again. You know, we'd had fun working together previously. You know, he was free, I was free. I was like, okay, let's get the team back together. That's the wrong reason to start a business. I applaud people who want to work with certain people. That's great. But I think if we had started Square without a real problem at its core, we would not have had the trajectory that we've had. Because what happened with Square was that we were actually starting a different sort of company. We had a different idea, a different product. We'd actually even hired a guy to build this other product. When I was in my studio, and I was trying to sell a piece of glass, and this is a ridiculous thing I make. It's a glass bathroom faucet. I was trying to sell one of these to a lady in Panama. She was trying to pay me with an American Express card, which I couldn't take, and I lost the sale because I couldn't process the card, and I was like, ah! And I was staring at my iPhone, and I was like, oh my God, I could do this on the iPhone if I just had. And then I went through the list. Oh, I need a merchant acquiring account, I need a hardware, I need this. But that's when the idea hit. But the reason I think it's been so successful is that fundamentally, it solves a problem, right? And that's much easier than finding an opportunity. Opportunities are sort of ephemeral. How do you tell if it's an opportunity or if it's just, you know, a trend or something? You don't know. You don't know if you've caught an opportunity. But you know if you got a problem. You know, my back hurts, that's a problem. If my back doesn't hurt, I've solved that problem. It's a simpler metric. It's easier for you to evaluate. And if you're an entrepreneur, the problem is compelling. And if you solve a problem for somebody else, they can now tell the world. So I'm going to talk about problems a little bit here. And one of the problems that I really thought at a deeper level was taught to me by a glass-blowing buddy of mine named Bob. And this gets again to one of the things that I think has really shaped what I do. This is Bob. He's a pretty normal guy. But to understand Bob, you really have to understand Bob's car. Now, this is a 1992 Chevy Corsica. But it's not really a Chevy Corsica. This is the Chevy official photo of the Corsica, which sort of implies that the Chevy is like a rugged car. It's kind of off-road looking there. That's not it. And that's not Bob's car because, first of all, you can tell it's not Bob's car because there's no orange bungee cord across the front of the hood. Now, Bob drives this version of the Corsica, and this is the bungee cord that normally holds Bob's hood shut. But one night, coming to the studio in the rain, the bungee cord breaks. The hood catches the wind, snaps up, folds over the windshield. Does Bob pull over? No. He leans out the window, but now he's getting pelted in the face with rain. So he decides this won't work. He drives back in. He drives 17 miles at night in the rain to my glass studio to get to work, viewing only the road he can see between the gap between the top of the hood and his dashboard. This tells you a couple of things about Bob. It tells you, first of all, this is a guy that is not easily stopped. Okay? He doesn't give up too much. But one of the things that I have always marveled about Bob, and Bob's car particularly, is that when Bob is running on rough times, sometimes he's had to live in this car. And that's always bothered me. Because I know the economics of glass. Glass blowing is a great business. I made a lot of money blowing glass. I supported my company. That was my venture capital. I just went in and made Christmas ornaments. Why is Bob sleeping in his car? He's a very talented artist. Well, the answer was, when I looked at it further, He couldn't access the system that fed the money back into his pocket. Because the galleries and the intermediaries and the people who got in between Bob and his ultimate customers just weren't a group of people that he could work with. Bob's just not a guy that can drive that car into a bank and get a merchant account. And so one of the things that I kept in mind when we were building Square was like, this is the guy. This is the guy. He's got a problem. He makes a product, it's a great product, but he can't sell it. There's a disconnect. That's what I solve. That's the problem. If you focus on a problem, it clarifies everything. And if you solve it for one, you can solve it for millions. So my recommendation before lunch is go out there and seek problems. Don't look for opportunities. And if you're having trouble coming up with, the next great idea, I think a great thing to do is a hack week. Even if you're in a company, a lot of this is like, oh, go quit your job. You don't necessarily have to quit your job. Just at your work, allocate a certain amount of time to people, make stuff up, build something, and you will see the solutions. And if we do this, we're in a golden moment, because right now we have this perfect storm. Things you can build. If you build it, people will find it, and now you know a way to generate all the opportunity you need. And if we all do this, the world will be a better place, and my friend Bob won't have to sleep in his car. Thank you.
Take one question.
I guess we can take one question if there is one.
Jim, there's a lot to this, but I'm going to try and go fast. I don't really know, but Omaha is home to two companies that helped invent the credit card and just made billions of dollars.
I'm sorry, whoa.
Give him one.
Slow it down. I didn't even hear that.
Omaha is home to two companies that helped invent the credit card, and they've made billions of dollars for people in Omaha.
That helped invent the credit card and made billions of dollars. For
and I left a couple years ago, one of them, because I couldn't do any payments innovation. And when I found out you'd give me one of these for free, and I took my first transaction, I about wept. And I used to go to all my friends in the credit card business and show them this, and they have this look of realization, and fear starts to show in their eyes. So thanks.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you.
So I have two questions, and you can pick either or none to answer.
Okay.
What kind of innovative things does Square have to handle your fraud, and what do you think about software patents?
Oh, software patents. I'll talk about software patents. I hate the patent process right now in software. I think the patents are very useful in other areas like life science or anything that has a huge capital outlay. Like if somebody's going to drop $100 million on FDA approval, you have to give them protection to allow them to make enough money to make it worthwhile to take those risks, because sometimes the drug doesn't get through the FDA. Okay, so we got to protect those guys. Patents, as they are practiced right now in Silicon Valley, are they're really sort of anti-innovative. Okay, so I won't talk about Square's IP specifically, but let's talk about one-click shopping. Okay, does anyone think that pushing a button to buy something and having it complete the transaction is something that would only have occurred to one individual? So a lot of the stuff that we're patenting right now out in the Valley, and I say we, not Square, I mean we, everybody who's doing this, and we're filing patents like everybody else, is not so much to protect ideas, it's to build this sort of thicket of threats that you use against somebody else. So Microsoft is great at suing people who are infringing on stuff that they're doing, and so now Apple has this patent, and Google just bought Motorola Mobility for their patent portfolio, and it's just a giant war. And I think it's hurting innovation ultimately, because in software, at the very least, I would like to see patents shortened. I mean, you may need 17 years on a drug or 22 years on a drug or something like that. But if you're inventing software, let's agree that pace is pretty quick, and give them 2-3 years, and then let's get on with it. So that's my personal opinion. I'm not speaking for the company here. I'm just saying that personally, although my name's on a lot of patents, I don't do that. I also patented my faucet. So there you go. Yes.
Hello, Jim. Thanks for coming today. I'd spoken with you earlier about this, but could you just touch on your involvement with the Arch grants in St. Louis, and then recently you invested in a St. Louis startup as well?
Yes. I've invested in some startups, and the Arch grants. Yes, I'll love to put a plug in for this. So St. Louis has this program where we will give $50,000 as a grant. So we don't take any equity in the company. We don't set any condition except that you have to run your business from St. Louis to any company that has a good idea. And I sat as the head judge on this panel. We just gave away 15 of these grants, so $750,000 was given away last week to 15 companies. And they ranged from all over the place. So we got companies from all over the world. We're applying. We're having 3 firms move in from other countries now. A couple of local guys, a couple from out of state. But about 400 companies came in. We winnowed it down to 30 finalists. From those, we chose 15. So if you get in the finals. And if you've got a good idea, it is a great thing to have somebody just give you enough money to get it to, past the prototype stage.
And to be a part of a company today with 2 St. Louis natives as co-founders, but being built outside of St. Louis, can you talk about what that means to you to have Arch grants available now?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear the question.
In relevance to, Square is co-founded by 2 St. Louis natives, but it's founded outside of St. Louis. What does Arch play in that story?
Oh, so Arch grants was sort of separate from what Square was doing. So first of all, we didn't have Arch grants when Square was started. So Jack and I started Square in the middle of 2008, and it was a down time, and everyone was like, "You're crazy to start a company." We were like, "Great," so we didn't have any of these structures. And honestly, St. Louis and frankly the Midwest in general has come along a lot further. When we were looking at starting Square, we really didn't have this environment that we now have today in the Midwest, and that's why I'm here, right? This energy, this entrepreneurial energy in the Midwest does not have to go out to the coast to get fed and watered. So that's, and that's what Arch Grants is about, and that's why I'm investing in companies in St. Louis.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.